Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm bringing you guys a track review video where I talk about several recently released songs and share my opinions on them. But this video is a bit different than normal, considering that if you saw an update video I posted a couple weeks back, I said in that video that I was going to be going on a vacation for a couple weeks, and as a result I wasn't really going to be able to review new albums or songs or anything like that in a video. I did review some of these songs already on Twitter. In fact, I reviewed all of these songs already on my Twitter, where I just kind of quickly shared with the world my thoughts in a tweet or two. But, with some of the songs in particular that I was talking about, I felt like I needed to talk about them in a video format. And plus, I'm someone who likes to have all my opinions and things like that archived in some way, so I figured, why not actually talk about them in a video just once I get back and, all of that stuff. So yeah, technically I've talked about all these songs already on my Twitter account, which, if I didn't mention it already, is linked in the description down below. If you're not following me there, you should, for things like updates and, for times like these when I could share track reviews there. And, yeah, I'm just going to be going into more detail here in today's video about my thoughts on those tracks. So, yeah, if you already saw those tweets and what I thought about them, you still might get some more information, some more opinions, at least coming from me concerning these tracks. And if you didn't see those tweets for whatever reason, nothing here is, familiar to you, at least when it comes to my opinions on these tracks. So, with that said, let's get into the first track I want to talk about here today. Shawshank by Denzel Curry. Now, this is a track that I thought was pretty decent overall. It reminds me a lot of his last album, Zoo, quite a bit, and I like that album a lot. However, I do feel like to some extent this track is kind of like a lesser version of what we were getting on that project, almost like this is like a B-side or a leftover song from that era or something. I believe this song was released as part of like a soundtrack to a video game or a movie or something like that. I don't remember specifically which game or movie it was, but if that's the case, the quality of this track I guess kind of makes sense. It just kind of feels like a leftover song from that era that was just kind of thrown onto a soundtrack. Because Denzel Curry is pretty popular right now, especially coming off of that project and his cover of Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine, all that stuff, so I guess it makes sense for him to keep riding that hype and popularity with another song. Like I said, I think the track is fine, it's pretty enjoyable, but I don't really think it's anything all too special coming from him at this point in his career. I would mostly recommend this to hardcore fans. Next up, I'm going to be talking about the newest track from Rico Nasty, Time Flies. Overall, this is a track that I really enjoyed. Compared to her last album, Anger Management, with Kenny Beats on the production, this track overall is a lot sweeter sounding, a lot more upbeat and happy sounding too. And overall, I found this just to be a really fun summertime song, especially like I said before, I was away on a vacation. I was listening to this song frequently over those couple of weeks I was away. Not just before I, uploaded my quick little review for it on Twitter, but even after that as well up to now. Like I said, I really enjoy the upbeat performance that Rico Nasty gives here on this track. I think her singing is really nice on this song. The lyrics are pretty nice as well. The beat matches with the overall vibe of this track pretty nicely as well. Overall, it's just a really, enjoyable summertime track, I guess. I don't think it's a song that is, super special or anything necessarily, but for what it's trying to achieve, I think it pulls it off really nicely. So yeah, overall, I would definitely recommend this track to fans of Rico Nasty. Moving on, the next song I want to talk about is this new self-titled track from the 1975. And, the 1975, if you're familiar with them, all of the opening songs to their albums are titled in 1975. So I'm guessing that this track is going to be the opening song to their upcoming album that they've teased at various points. I think the 1975 are a decent band. I didn't really like their last album all too much. But I was still kind of hoping that their next album would be a bit more interesting, but boy, did this track just not do much for me. And I do want to say before actually diving into, talking about this track, that the topic that this track deals with its subject matter and its lyrics, that being, climate change and a lot of the negative things that are happening as a result of that, it's a message I really agree with. I think that climate change is an important issue, and the fact that, the band is talking about it, I think that's a good thing overall. However, that's really the only positive thing I could say for this track, because essentially what this song is just a spoken word lecture, I guess you could say, talking about climate change and how we need to change all of it and stuff, over this really boring sounding instrumental that just goes on for way too long. Like, if this track was maybe like a minute long of this, I can kind of understand it, especially as like an opening to an album or something. But for I believe it's like 5 minutes that this track runs, it's just this boring instrumental, like I said previously. Nothing about it that's really all that special or engaging. with this very monotonous voice delivering this, essentially a lecture about climate change. And like I said, I agree with the message that's going on here, and I like the fact that the band is sharing it with the world, but couldn't they do it in a way that's a bit more interesting than this? Because this track just makes me want to fall asleep. It's so boring to listen to. And as like an opening track, if this is going to be the opening to their next album, it's going to be a really crappy opening track is all I'm going to say, because I'm not sure what you could follow this up with that's going to make it a better album. I mean, I'm sure if you follow this up with pretty much anything, it'll sound better in comparison, but still, it's just a terrible start to an album, I feel. And like I said, I haven't heard the album, of course, so I can't really comment on that, but still, this track is just so boring and unnecessary, I feel. I like the message of this track, I think it's fine, but, when it comes to actually making a song, you gotta actually make an enjoyable song, not just an enjoyable message that I happen to agree with. Next up, I'm going to be talking about the first of one of the 2 new tracks from Brockhampton, I've Been Born Again. I was really excited to see this new Brockhampton material, considering, if you know me, I'm a pretty big Brockhampton fan. I mean, after all, Iridescence was my favorite album of last year, and one of the few albums this decade I've given a perfect score to. So I was excited to see what the band was going to follow it up with, and overall, based on, not just this track, but the other track they dropped as well, I'm pretty excited to see what direction the band is going to be going in. I think when it comes to the band and their deliveries on these 2 tracks, they're not anything too crazy different from what they've done before, but one thing I noticed across both of these songs is that the instrumentals kind of have this sort of off-kilter, dark feel to them. Like they're kind of putting up a front of, happiness or maybe a bit more of a cheerful nature, but when you kind of look past it, especially with some of the lyrics on these tracks, they come across a lot darker. Maybe I'm looking into it a bit too much considering we only have 2 tracks at this point, but based on these 2 songs, I like the sonic direction that this album might be going in. I think that the kind of off-kilter sounding beats are really interesting. I think the guys in the group do a nice job flowing over them as well. And I've Been Born Again, like I said, I like a lot of the performances on this thing. Particularly, I really like Joba's verse on this track, and Matt Champion's kind of verse outro thing was also really interesting too. And If You Pray Right, I like the jazzy instrumental that the band brings here to this thing. I thought it was really nicely done, and the kind of noisier outro to this track was also a bit interesting too. I'm excited to see how that factors into the flow of the overall album. And I think that once again, the guys' performances on this track are really nice too. I think Kevin's hook on this track is really great. Once again, I think Joba has a really stellar verse, as does Dom. Really, these 2 tracks just show Brockhampton once again doing what they do best. I'm not quite sure I would say if these are 2 of my favorite Brockhampton songs ever made necessarily, at least at this point, but still, for fans of the group, there's stuff that you'll really enjoy in these couple of tracks, and I would highly recommend them as a result of that. Moving on, the next track I'm going to be reviewing is the newest single from Korn, Cold. Overall, I don't have a ton to say about this song, as it just kind of feels like Korn by the numbers at this point. Like, all the performances on this thing are pretty acceptable, whether it be the instrumentals or the vocals, they're all, fine at the very least. It's just that there's so little on this track that really engages me and makes me want to come back for repeated listens. For example, like, between when I uploaded my initial review of this thing in tweet format and, when I came back to give this thing another listen right before recording this video, I didn't remember much about the track. Like, I'd forgotten much about what happened in this song, and I do want to make it clear that I gave this at least the same amount of listens as everything else I talked about in those tweets formats, and yet there's still a lot of other songs that I've talked about here in this video, for better or for worse, that are more memorable than this track. Like I said, all the performances on it are okay, but it's really just kind of Korn by the numbers. Like, if you know the band, you know their style and sound, especially, coming off of their last couple of records, you know what you're going to be getting here on this new single. So, if you like that sound, if you like what the band's been doing, I think you'll like this track, but if not, this song isn't going to change your mind or anything. Next up is the newest track from Idols, I Dream Guillotine. I wasn't really sure what to expect from this track, considering the band's last album, Joy as an Act of Resistance, was an album that I liked, but I wasn't really crazy about it, or at least compared to a lot of other people who seem to really love the project. The same could be said with that Mercedes Marxist single they dropped earlier this year that was a B-side from that project, and this new song here is another B-side from that last album of theirs, so I wasn't really expecting to love it all that much, maybe thinking it was just, decent at best, but honestly, I like this track quite a bit. In fact, I think I like it a fair bit more than a lot of material that was on that last album of theirs, given that a lot of the aggression that pops up on this thing reminds me a bit more of their debut album that I liked a lot more. The song features this massive, aggressive hook to it that I really enjoy, and just overall the way the aggression in this song is mixed together with the lyrics and what's being talked about here in this track, it makes for a really enjoyable, aggressive listen. And considering I like that aggressive sound that was present on Brutalism, I really enjoyed this track, as I said previously. I still do think that if you enjoyed the band's last album, you'll also like this thing as well. Just generally speaking, if you're a fan of this band to any extent, I think this track is pretty enjoyable. So yeah, overall, if you're an Idols fan, definitely check this out. Moving on, the next track I want to talk about is the newest song from Alter Bridge, Pay No Mind. Overall, once again, I don't have a ton to say about this track. Kind of like the Korn song I was talking about not too long ago. It kind of does feel like Alter Bridge by the numbers here, but I do think that this track, at least compared to the Korn song I was talking about previously, it does have a few more things going for it. Most notably, the hook on this track, which, kind of like the Idol song I was just talking about, is this massive, catchy hook that is really infectious and enjoyable to listen to. All the performances across this track are pretty solid as well. The vocals sound fantastic. All the instruments sound, fine enough at the very least. It's just that really outside of this hook that I really enjoy, a lot of the rest of the track just isn't super interesting. The verses are okay. The instrumental, in terms of the composition of it, is just okay. The lyrics are, once again, just okay. It's just a pretty by-the-numbers Alter Bridge track, and, like I said, the hook is really nice on this thing, but I would primarily recommend this track to Alter Bridge fans and not really anyone else outside of that group. But overall, I still think it's a decent song. Moving on, the next track I'm going to be talking about is the newest cover from Fully Involved, a cover of Lil Nas X's Family, You and Me. Overall, this was a pretty interesting cover, as it took the original song, which I think is a pretty decent track, one of the better Lil Nas X songs, and translates it into the sound of the last Fully Involved EP in a really nice way. This thing kind of sounds like it could have fit onto participation trophies really nicely. This cover strips back some of the more electronic moments that were present in the original track, and goes for a more simple acoustic approach to things that I think offers a new refreshing twist on the song that I really enjoyed. I think Mark's vocal performance on this track is really nice too. The whole way this thing comes together just makes for a really cozy, enjoyable sounding cover. It maintains enough of the original track's strengths while also making something new, to the point where I overall have to say that this is a pretty good cover. Definitely one that you should check out if you're a fan of either, the artist being covered or the artist that's doing the covering here. Check it out. And finally, the last track I want to talk about here in today's video is the new track from Tool via Inoculum. Now, this track is one of the ones that, primarily inspired me to make this full-length video here talking about all of these songs, along with the Brockhampton tracks I talked about previously, given that I was just really excited to listen to and talk about this track, given that, of course, it's been over a decade since the last Tool album we got. We're finally getting a new one this year, it seems, with them returning to streaming services and dropping this lead single. I, like a lot of people, was really excited to see what the band was going to give us here on this track, and overall, it's a good song in my opinion. I know that a lot of people are going to have, crazy expectations for this new Tool album, expecting it to be, like, the best thing ever or anything. Personally, I don't expect that, just because it's a bit of a ridiculous level of, expectations to have coming into any new project, but I expect this new album of theirs to be good at the very least, especially given the wait that we've had between projects. And this new song here definitely showcases that the band has the potential to release another good project. Will it be better than anything they've dropped previously? I'm not 100% sure at this point, but I think that this first track definitely is a good sign of things to come. This new track features this very spacey, kind of cerebral sound to it. It reminds me a fair bit of the sounds that the band was playing around with on projects like Lateralis and 10,000 Days, for example. It does kind of feel like an extension of that sound, which is both kind of a good thing and a bad thing to some extent. It's kind of a good thing in the sense that the band has kind of done those sounds really well in the past, but at the same time it does kind of leave the song feeling a bit too similar at times to the vibe that they were going for on previous projects, which is certainly not a fatal flaw or anything with this song. I just kind of hope that a lot of the other songs on this upcoming album, or maybe hearing this track in the context of those songs, makes for a very different sounding experience. Every band member's performance here on this track sounds pretty great, whether it be the very spacey sounding instrumental I mentioned previously, or Maynard's vocals on this thing, which definitely have a bit more of a punch to them compared to that last A Perfect Circle album we got last year. Definitely reminds me a bit more of some of his best vocals that he's done on previous efforts in the past. I can see some people saying that certain moments on this track feel a bit too drawn out for their own good. However, I think that's kind of a consequence of this track being released just as a single as opposed to hearing it in the context of the full-length project, as I'm sure that these more drawn-out moments will just simply add to the atmosphere and vibe of whatever full project we're going to be getting in a few weeks. But I would kind of agree in the sense that hearing this thing on its own, it does make certain aspects of this track feel a bit more drawn out than they need to be. But like I said, hearing it in the context of the full album will hopefully, make it sound a bit better. And any complaints I have with this track overall are pretty minor. And at this point, I think Tool fans will be willing to eat anything up that, at the very least, sounds good. And coming as one of those Tool fans, yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this track turned out. And I'm still pretty hopeful that this new album of theirs will be good, if not great. And that is all my thoughts on these tracks that I talked about over the past few weeks on my Twitter account. As I said previously, if you're not already following me there, make sure you do so. The link is in the description down below. Typically, I do things like updates over there, as well as music-related commentary, some funny stuff on occasion, Twitter stuff, all that jazz. If you're not already following me there, make sure you do so. Also, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content. Things like album reviews, track reviews. I definitely will be doing album reviews for some of the albums coming in the near future that songs I talked about today are lead singles from, or just other singles from. Things like the new Tool album, the new Brockhampton album, the new Korn album, the new Alter Bridge album. All that stuff is going to be covered here in the near future. So if you want to see my full thoughts on those projects when they drop, make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys for watching once again, and stay golden.